What's wrong with society? Where's this headed? When you look back at history, has this happened before? Does history repeat itself?
Sex trafficking, it starts in the junior high hallway. They're trying to get guys addicted to porn at such a young age. You're basically trained to start looking at women as objects instead of humans from a young age. It doesn't just happen overnight. These young girls, man, they get in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. It's like society's screaming at you. The most important thing about you is your body. So now you have women that are starting to look at themselves as objects. We have a lot of women that are like, well, at least on OnlyFans, I don't have somebody touching me. But if I'm going to make money, if I'm going to do this, this is what I've been trained to do my whole life. This is what I've been told is what I'm valued for. We live in a country where it's just, this is normal. When are we going to get tired of it and stop drinking the freaking Kool-Aid and go, listen, this isn't working out. We're not becoming a better society.
Society is crumbling. Good men can no longer do nothing. This is why good men should stand up and get out there and make noise and really go after this shit. Because it's going right to your children. Whether you realize it or not, they're being impacted by it. Who knows what the future looks like? I don't know where this ends. Okay, guys. Hey, welcome to the show, Man on a Mission. We're here with my dear friend, Caleb Altmeyer. Caleb, thank you for being here today. I want to give a quick, brief introduction to our audience here. I met Caleb not that long ago, but we instantly became friends. And it's cool when you meet someone and you kind of get under the hood of what they're doing and sort of the value they bring to the community. And Caleb instantly shined as a star in my eyes. And the more I've gotten to know him, the more I realize this kid is incredibly smart, insanely talented. He's not only going big places in life, but he's got a mission that is so profound. It's so heart-touching to my soul that I knew I had him on the show and I had to get his story out here. I won't dive too much into what he's doing, but Caleb here comes from a long line of people that have been givers in his family. And he's really stepped out onto his own, into the light, and he started an organization called Helping Captives. So I'll let him sort of unpack what Helping Captives is and really his story and how we got here. But let me just say it's really profound what Caleb is doing. And as you guys listen to this in the audience, I would really encourage you to really think about how you can live a life that has real meaning and real validity. And if you're not giving back and if you're not really thinking about ways to help other people, I think you're really missing out on one of the most secrets to life of real fulfillment, real happiness. But Caleb will be a really good example, I think, as we unpack his story here. So Caleb, thank you, man. Welcome to Man on a Mission.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Okay, so we started with Helping Captives. You want to just give us your backstory real quick and kind of catch us up on how you got here, just so the audience has some framework?
Yeah. Let's see, background story. So I was raised in Spokane. My mom's a quadriplegic, so I was raised by a mom in a wheelchair. And then my dad is just this incredible dude that actually ran a homeless shelter. So my grandfather was the executive director of a large homeless organization in the area. And then my dad jumped in 1985 and started working there. And then my uncle came in, and my uncle still is the executive director, CEO of the organization today. So my father actually ran he was the men's director at Union Gospel Mission Homeless.
So that was the name of the organization, Union Gospel Mission? I'm well versed because I've been really donating to them for like the last decade here in this, and that's a powerhouse brand and charity here in town for people that don't know. It's
amazing, man. And so what my uncle has been able to accomplish with that organization is insane. And so as a kid growing up in that, it wasn't that big. It wasn't like that. So, So it's pretty cool as a young person to actually see what the potential and what God could do with an organization like that. So that's probably been the biggest blessing in my life, is because I've seen something scale like that. And so I can see how many people's lives can be impacted if you do it properly. And so my dad was actually the men's director at the homeless shelter. So like my earliest memories are hanging out with homeless people.
Amazing.
Having my birthday party at like a homeless shelter.
Dude, was that normal for you?
Totally normal. That was just my childhood. So I had a mom in a wheelchair, and she was just my mom.
Why was she in a wheelchair?
So my parents got married. And then 5 months into their marriage, they got in a car accident. And so their first 2 years of marriage was just in and out of rehab.
Sorry.
So she's a quadriplegic. They're still married. Yeah. They're awesome. My mom's taught me just so much because she never became a victim. She wanted to have kids. She raised us. She learned how to cook, how to sew, how to paint. She's incredible. So
you told me a story one time that I'm thinking back where you talked about sitting in her lap.
Yeah.
And
that's the biggest memory for us is we would just, even my kids today, they just love going and hang out with Mimi, and they just hop on her wheelchair and they just cruise. So she's just like a kid magnet. And so, yeah, you just sit on her, and then we would throw a wagon and would attach a wagon to the back of her and just cruise around town, and all the kids would hop in the wagon.
Yeah, that's cool.
Or you go like Roller Valley, and everybody would just throw their skates on and then grab the back of the wheelchair.
She's not a victim.
Not at all.
No, that's winning.
Yeah, she's not a victim at all.
Good for her.
And then my dad is just like, he's just next level. So, a lot of people are known for what they gather. My family's known for what they give away. And that's just kind of how I was raised.
That's an amazing thought.
Yeah.
Most people are known for what they gather, the things they acquire, things they buy, the things they bring in. You guys are known for what you give out.
Yeah.
I love that.
So that's just how I was raised, man. And best childhood ever. Can't complain about anything, really. Had two great parents, just thick and thin. Just me, my little brother had a great childhood. And then,
did you guys have money?
No, not like real money, not like that. We didn't go without. My dad worked hard, but we
selflessly just giving family.
Yeah, just normal
Sure.
childhood. My dad worked hard, but that wasn't his motivation.
So this servant heart you had, I could feel the servant heart in you. Was that learned at your childhood?
Man, I think it's just how we grew up.
Yeah, it's just ingrained in you.
I don't know any different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what happened was when I got to junior high school, like that's when everything started to unravel for me, because that's when I started realizing, oh, my mom can't walk. Right? So instead of like noticing all that God had given me, I started like the enemy likes to get you to notice the little things you don't have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so now it's
right.
like, hey, you can't dance with your mom. You can't jump on a trampoline with your mom. You can't throw a ball with your mom. Like,
yeah, now she's got a problem.
Yeah, if I'm so good, if God's so good, why can't your mom walk? Right? So these are the thoughts that are going through my head. Yep. And unfortunately, I was going to a pretty religious system school that I'd grown up in. I didn't feel comfortable to talk about what I was going through, because I felt like I'd get in trouble if I was like, hey, I'm struggling with God. I'd get in trouble. So I just internalized it all, didn't talk to anybody.
But you were struggling with God.
Oh, heavy, bro. And I've just always been kind of an entrepreneur and hustler type person anyway. So once I stopped liking school, I was just trying to figure out like, what's the bottom line? How do I need to pass?
Yeah, sure.
And then how can I go do my thing? So in, I don't know, 9th grade, going into high school, like my whole life was just basketball. So at a little private school, that was it. Like everything was just basketball. Yeah. So that's all I wanted to do. I was left-handed, good point guard. That's all I cared about, was just playing hoop. And so my 8th grade and my 9th grade year, the school splits. So I'm thinking I'm finally going to go into high school and play basketball. Like that's all I cared about. And then all of a sudden the school split. And I ended up going to a public school for the first time in my life. And I show up, I had missed like summer league tryouts. Like I didn't know anybody at the school. Go and start hanging out with some friends. But they're all playing basketball. That's all I know. And I can't do that. So I go try out for cross country, hated it. I love Mrs. Lanker. She's super, super cool. The coach, still family friend, but I just wasn't my thing to go run like 8 to 10 miles a day. And so, but in that, I started hanging out with all these senior girls, and I was a freshman guy, and just started hanging out with them and started getting into trouble. And then all of a sudden school starts, and I go sit down at the lunch table, and that's that weird, awkward time for every kid, right? Like, who am I going to sit with? I don't know anybody. So these girls invite me over, and they're hanging out with all the guys that are smoking pot and fighting. And so that's the guys that instantly like brought me into their group. And my dad was a boxer, so I just kind of fell into that group of friends. And then as they started graduating, about 3/4 of the year through the school year, my dad went on a 40-day fast. So he just literally went out in the woods.
No shit.
Just water.
40 days?
When I say my dad's a G, bro, like he's the real
That's a real thing? 40 days?
Just straight water.
I didn't know that you could go 40 days.
Yeah, my dad's...
I love fasting,
44 days.
but I didn't know 44.
Yeah, he went up to the mountain because he was praying for my mom to get healed and trying to get direction on the new season of his life. So I was still holding on to like hope that my mom was going to walk.
Sure.
You know?
And hope's powerful.
And so my dad's gone for 40 days.
Wild.
So now all of a sudden, I've never not had like a man in the house being in charge. So now all of a sudden I'm kind of feeling... like I'm the new man of the house. I can kind of do what I want. Going to a new school, starting to get in trouble, start sneaking out, smoking pot, doing all the partying stuff. My dad comes back. My mom's not healed. And now all of a sudden I'm like, I just lost it. Like I was just like, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to move out. I'm going to do my thing. So my parents would, my dad just said, here, if you're going to live here, here's the rules. And I didn't want to follow the rules. So I moved in with a friend, and that was just kind of my life. So from about 15 to 18 years old, man, I just partied. And my ultimate goal,
kid.
Dude, for real.
The story
just
of
lost.
the story of so many great men.
Just lost. And like, it's funny looking back at my pictures. I was like, one day I'm dressed like a gang member. The next day I'm dressed like an Abercrombie and Fitch. It just depended on what girl I was trying to hook up with.
You didn't know who the fuck you were.
No. And whatever girl I was trying to hook up with at the time, whatever she was into, that's just what I was dressed like. You know what I mean? Just
sure.
trying to become that person. So I was just trying to figure myself out. And so at 18 and 19 years old, I come home to my parents' house one day, and my mom's got Bible verses all over the television. And I started getting angry because I'm like, I didn't want to hear anything about God. Like, anytime God would even come up, I would just like lose my mind. I was just so angry and frustrated and just so full of demons. And
Did you stop believing him, or were you just pissed at him?
I think I was just mad. Like, I knew he was real. I'd seen too much.
You believe there's a creator at that time?
Yeah, but that was it. Just kind of like, it's almost like I knew a lot about God, but I didn't know God. Like, I grew up around like hearing about him.
Yeah, I resonate.
Didn't really have a relationship.
Totally
with
feel
him.
that. Yep.
Yeah. So, 18 years old, man, I go to my parents' house, and my mom's got Bible verses on the television, and I get mad because I think I wanted to watch a basketball game, and I couldn't because there's just all these Bible verses, like literally on paper, taped to the television. And I'm like, Mom, what the heck? She goes, well, every time I want to watch TV, I just pray these scriptures over you. And so my mom's a real one, man. She would pray for me. She had all the neighbor ladies praying for me. She'd be walking around giving them my picture and saying, hey, pray for my son. He's getting into trouble. And so anyways, I end up falling asleep. I go into her basement, I fall asleep, and next thing I know, I like left my body, and I was in a dream, and God came and spoke to me, and that changed my whole life. And it was insane, man, like instantaneous.
How old were you?
18.
So you're 18,
just turned 18.
And you have this moment. Yeah. You describe it as just one moment in time when it all just came together.
Yeah, I mean, it was moments that kind of happened, but this was like the main thing, man. It's like
God came to you.
He literally just comes to me in this crazy dream. I'm gonna write a book about it and just be and let it out. I'm 35 now. I feel like it's time that I can kind of let everybody know what's happened. But it comes and speaks to me, and what hit me was like I didn't deserve this. He had a calling on me. He had plans for my life. He wanted me to go do something, and I didn't deserve it at all. Like, I was just messed up, and I was terrified, man. When like God speaks to you. And it was terrifying. Like, I felt like smaller than an ant. Like, it was just this heart, like this crazy fear of the Lord of like how massive He is. Like, this is the God that everyone nowadays says like the universe. I pray to the universe. Like, no, dude, I serve a God that created the universe.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, that breathed out the world. Like, that's how massive He is. And that was kind of what hit me. And so ever since then, man, I just started slowly reading my Bible, trying to get back in my life back in order. Had a lot of different things happen along the way. Started going back to church, just started serving God and wanting to do what He had called me to. And eventually, you got
lucky, man.
So blessed, bro. Like, so many of my friends are like dead or locked up, and that could have been me. So
that's
quick.
the pathway when you start. That the environment that you're around, the drugs, the partying. It goes to some terrible places. You know that we both have been there, but to get out of it is that's such a gift.
So blessed, like the fact that he plucked me out of that. And
I wonder if you have to go through like the types of hell that I would describe as like where you don't even recognize your soul in the mirror, and you may not wake up tomorrow morning. Sort of these like really lows in life. Do you have to get to tragedy for you to waken up?
No, I don't think you do, but I think there's something special about the people that have got to that point. You just realize
they're powerful.
You worship God so intensely because you've been forgiven so much. But then I have on the flip side of a brother that never turned away and is light years ahead of like where most people are. Because
he's a good dude too.
He had the willpower and the wherewithal to
say no. Some people, you're right.
He could say no. He's like, this is right, this is wrong, and this is what the Bible says, and I'm not going to do it. And so he didn't have to go through
That's a good point.
all the hell and all the crazy.
I'll say this to that point is it just seems like it's incredibly common for people that their energy and it draws me in. People that I'm always inspired by. Somehow, when you get underneath a lot of these people, they've walked through hell and they made it. Yeah. And so there's power around it for sure, but it seems to be really common in people that that really are making a profound mark in this world. You know, at least from the vantage point I sit on, it's more common than not. Yeah. And I think that's who I like to speak to personally, is to just the guy that didn't stay above, you know, the surface the whole time. The one that got sucked down. Giving those people hope is fun. Like, I enjoy it because, like, you could do it. Like, just let's make different decisions. Like, flip the script, baby. Yeah. Those are who I like to speak to. But I do find that that was like that's where my heart goes. But I do find that people like you that are doing a really amazing things, oftentimes, man, when you get beneath the surface, there's some kid in there that really went off the rails in a bad way.
Yeah. No, I definitely can see some truth to that. I think what happens is you're so lost. For me, I had no hope. So the only thing I could rely on is learning how to hear God's voice.
Sure.
So that's it. Like, even getting to this point with you, it's because I was just, every day, like, I spend time with God to try and just hear him and just follow his voice. It feels kind of like you're a dad that's like walking in front of you when you're a little kid, and he's got those big shoes in the snow. And you're just like, you're just trying to follow where your dad's footprints are. And so for me, that's all I had. Like, I was 2.5 years behind in high school when I gave my life to God, wrecked my life, had no hope. I mean, I went back to my contract school, had to go through a whole re-entry program through summer just to go back to high school. And then if I failed one class, they would have stripped everything away. Like, that's like where I found myself. Just last minute and like, no. So in that moment, like, did you know God was my way out of this?
Did you know it was going to be charity that was going to be sort of the business of your life at that point?
No, I knew it was going to be some form of ministry because God had come to me and said, I want you to go into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples. So I knew I was called to ministry, and I knew that, like, okay, if I've been wrestling with this concept of God, so when I realized, oh my goodness, you're real, it was just all in, you know. And so I go back to high school. And the first day I go back in, I go meet with my counselor, and we're sitting there, and he's like, hey, what are you doing back? Like, how did you get back here? So I tell him this crazy story, and then he's like, hey, could you help me with these other kids that are struggling with drug addiction? I said, absolutely. So we walk into the next week, he calls me down out of class, and, you know, it's like a 45-minute, hour-long class with kids struggling with drug addiction. I walk in, and every single person in that class I had sold pot to.
Really?
Yeah.
No shit.
Every one of them.
And now you're the one. Now you're the one that's going to help them.
Come to church with me. Yeah,
that's
it was
funny.
That much of a flip.
Wow,
and they're just looking at
it's pretty
me
cool
like,
though. What a story!
Like, you're crazy. You know?
That's neat.
Yeah. So that was it, man. So I think for me, fast forwarding, I knew that I was called to ministry, or I just wanted to like share the hope that I'd found. Right. That's what I was thinking I was going to do. Was I was going to help all the churches get out of their building and go help reach our community, and that's what I really thought I was going to do. And then in about 2014, our life just got turned upside down because somebody came to my dad's church because he was still working at the mission, and he was doing Monday night like church services. And they would let women come into those church services. And so he was speaking, doing his thing, and a lady came up to him and started talking to him and telling him her story, that she had been trafficked from the age of 6 by her parents.
She was sex trafficked by her own family?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's common, right?
Yeah. And so she starts telling him that story, and the kicker that was my babysitter. And so that really hit us
when you were
hard.
A kid.
When I was a kid. So before we moved out to the valley, we lived on 8th and Carnahan, and we lived in this little cul-de-sac, and she lived next door, and she'd come over and hang out all the time.
And you had no idea?
No. Thought she was just a neighbor girl that smelled good.
Did you know? Right, because that's the babysitter.
Yeah.
And you're the little young buck.
Yeah, just a little kid. She's like 4 or 5 years older than me.
Do you remember her parents at all? Any recollection of them?
No.
But who would have thought your babysitter the whole time was being sold by her own family, and that was your babysitter? Yeah, I think people think with sex trafficking, and I think this is a good place to sort of start opening up this topic, because this is probably the seed that really opened your mind up to this. Obviously, this is what you just revealed, but people think it's not happening in your community.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Well, people think that all the time. They think like sex trafficking is something that happens overseas. Yeah. You know, or it's like some kid getting dumped into some container and shipped over, you know.
Yeah. I remember Tim Ballard saying something. Reality. I hung out with Tim Ballard a few times, and I pulled some things from him that just sat with me. One of the things that he talked about is he, you know, got into this subject too, and he became a, you know, famous monster, but, you know, in his own right. But just sort of at the core of what he learned that I think was still valuable that always sat with me is, even if you have a teenage son and he's playing video games in a house, in this modern era, all the stuff they're hearing on their headphones and their little microphone as they're playing their game, there could be predators out there that are slowly sort of grooming a really terrible setup. Or your teenage daughter is on in Instagram or start thinking she's dating a guy. Point is it can slip into your kids' heads and get inside their world. Even in a good family, it could happen. There's so many different ways to get trafficked. Next thing you know, the little girl's sending pictures of herself because she thinks she's in a relationship with another 15-year-old. And you don't realize, well, now that becomes leverage from an adult, and this teenage girl is terrified. But Tim's the one that sort of showed how a good family with a strong dad and a great mother, how it can still come into your walls and really destroy your child. And you'll never even know it. So I think just being aware that it can happen anywhere. And in your case, with your babysitter, it's really profound. If you want to add to that, sort of how accessible it is to be trafficked and all the different things that actually means. Because I thought it was always shipping containers full of girls. It's not really how it works.
Taken with Liam Neeson, like that's kind of what you think of. Yeah, so that's 100%. Most of the grooming now happens online. And you got to think, like, it's not that complicated for a little 14 or 15-year-old girl to think she's dating some guy. I know. Snap a photo, send it to him, and now all of a sudden
he owns her now.
He owns her because he can say, hey, if you don't keep sending these, if you don't meet me. We've had pastors' kids get caught up in that. And then they feel like they can't even go talk to their pastor or their teacher because they're saying, hey, if you tell anybody, I'm going to send all these photos to your youth group. You know? Can you
imagine being a parent and having a little girl and you think you're doing a great job, everything's fine, and she's out doing the most horrific things because somehow someone found odd leverage against her.
Or she thinks she's protecting her other siblings.
Exactly right. Oh,
that happens all the time. So they'll be like, if you don't do this, we're going to do this to your little sister. And they get caught up in it pretty quick. Yeah,
I'm glad you just at least gave that window to open up early in the story of where we're leading this thing, which is really cool. We're taking this, but just that reality that it's not what most people think. I think most people, and I love that at least that movie Sound of Freedom, it did bring sort of a big, real loud into the world on this subject, because for so long it was almost seemed like taboo.
Yeah, we do 4 trainings, and we do them every 2 weeks, and we do like live trainings at our education center.
Right.
But when that Sound of Freedom movie came out, we had
Amazing.
to do like
so
2
there's a good
week.
effect for it, you know?
Yeah, it really opened people's eyes up.
That's good, man.
They flooded to us, and it was
sure.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, keep going, because I like to foreshadow a little bit, but you're doing something really cool right now that I didn't open up with the big banger. Maybe I'll go back and redo that part because it's really cool what you're doing. But so that was your entrance into the world.
Yep. That's the first time I heard about it. So I went and met with her. Because I'm like, I'm just being honest with you. It was really hard for me to believe some of the stuff my dad was telling me. I was like, wait, you're telling me that parents sell their kids, and this is happening to somebody that we deeply care about? Like, it was really hard for me. So I went and met with her, and she's telling me her story. And when I went and met with her, man, she's hiding out in a little cabin out in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and she's just terrified. She's just not the same person. She's just her insides, internal organs, like everything. She just been so abused at that time. In her 30s.
Okay, and is she still hanging on from the trauma of her past, or did that lead her into a terrible life?
No, it's just her whole life was like that, you know. And so when you're being, raped,
do they
10
think it's
times
normal?
a day,
when
you're 6, 7, 8 years old, like, dude, everything, your internal organs, everything are just shot. There's all the surgeries, all the stuff. So she's just dealing with all the stuff from her trauma of her past. And so then I come back and I'm running that youth center. And I had one girl that was was working with us, and I'm sitting there and we're having our staff meeting, and I'm just not there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just processing what I just heard, and they're asking me like, hey, are you okay? And I'm like, dude, I just heard this story. So I kind of briefly say it, and my coworker starts crying. She has the very similar story, dude. Her dad worked at a prison and would sell her to his prison guard buddies.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And that's another girl that you're close with.
Totally. It was just right there. Yeah. And I'm like, what? And then she opens up even more, and she goes, because my dad's like a boxer, rides motorcycles. Like, he's a pretty like manly guy, like we call him the John Wayne of our family. Like, that's just how my dad is. So she opens up about, every time my dad would come to the office to see us and hang out with us, that's why she'd walk into the back room. Mm-hmm. She goes, because I'd get triggered every time your dad would come in, because he reminds me of guys that used to work at the prison.
Sad, man.
And so I'm sitting there, and after about a month of him coming in, she realizes he's safe. And I'm not making this up, man, like probably a 10-yard walk. For her to like walk 10 yards just to come give my dad a hug, she's just trembling in fear, crying. It looked like an abused animal or something that was just like hiding in the wall, like in the corner, just terrified to come out. And I know how loving and how amazing my father is.
He's a good man.
And just the best. And then just to see how terrified she was to get a father's hug, because she never had a real father's hug because her dad sold her. She was just so scared. And it took her like 10 minutes maybe just to walk that short little period to get a hug from my dad. Yeah. Dude, she just starts
So your dad helped change her life, but she had to fight through the emotions of allowing her to trust him.
Crying like crazy. And it's just embedded in my brain.
Wow.
And from that moment on, that's when I was like, all right, I want to do something to help. And that's kind of when my father and I sat down, and he retired from UGM. He came over and started working for our charity. And we opened up the first safe house in Spokane. And he used all of his retirement money to make that happen.
To fund it. So your first safe house, you were actually starting to focus on the aftercare. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, back then we didn't know what we were getting into. Yeah. We just thought in our head, if we can just get a house, put some like host family parents in there, like everything will be great, right? We'll get them off the street. They'll go into this loving family, and everything will be great.
Okay.
We had no understanding. Like they're all coming off of drugs. They've been abused 10 times a day. They're there's a lot of mental health. There's so much stuff. They need full wraparound care. They need the people at the house need to be able to rotate so they can get a break. And we thought we'd help 2 or 3 women, and it was just going to be a part of the organization. It wasn't the main focus. It was, we had a food distribution. I had a food bank. I had a young adult house. I had youth outreach programs. I had so much stuff going on. So we thought we'll just open up this one house. And we had 21 women go through the house in 9 months. And that's when we realized, like, this is much bigger than we anticipated. So we started going and meeting with other anti-trafficking organizations. And this is like 2017. And we started meeting. We realized there's a lot of women back then that were, like, getting out of the life or getting rescued, but they had nowhere to go. Like, nobody knew what to do with them once they got out of it. So we started from there learning how to do long-term care programming. And so that's what we did, was we offered like a 9-month program with 9 months of transitional living. And just, we'd have women fly in from all over the United States and go into our program. And then probably 2 years ago, we started seeing an uptick in like a lot of local calls, a lot of North Idaho calls, a lot of more Spokane, wanting
Who makes the call usually when you get a call? Is it
we would get calls from them, their family members, detox centers, the hospitals, other agencies. They start
What's
hearing
your names there? Yeah,
they start hearing you guys specialize in anti-trafficking. But most of the time, if it was a local person, we get them out of town.
Is there anyone else doing this? It seems like aftercare might be the hardest part of fighting sex trafficking.
It's challenging, and it's not as
getting the bad guys,
like sexy to raise
the glorified
money for.
part, right? Going and taking down the bad guys, the guys that are, the Superman that are crime stoppers. A lot of it, there's that part of it. Yeah. But then what do we do with the girl after we, go take down the abuser or the bad guy? Yeah.
There's really 3 types of like organizations, really. I mean, there's a lot more in between, but there's 3 main types. So you're going to have prevention, intervention, and recovery. So the best way I could describe that would be, like right out here, if there was a river and there was a bunch of kids drowning in the river, you'd have to have somebody run to the community and say, stop going down there, kids are drowning. Okay. Right? So you're going to have organizations that do a lot on education, trying to change laws, trying to let the community know that trafficking is happening. Yeah, stop going down there, kids are drowning.
This podcast is a form of that. We're making it aware.
Then you got people that are going to dive in the water. So overseas, you're going to have some of those organizations that go in and do rescue. Here in the United States, you're going to have a lot more law enforcement, stuff like that. You're going to have people that are willing to dive in the water and actually get those kids out and get those women out.
Is that also killing the bad guy along the way?
Potentially.
It's in that category?
Yeah, so that's the part, that's that rescue. And I think that's what all of us are like uniquely at the beginning of hearing trafficking, that's what we're all excited about. Even myself, like, oh, let's go. I just want to get, we want to get these guys and we want to get these women out of the situation.
Absolutely.
Right. But then then what happens is once those women get to the edge of that water, you have to have people there that are going, hey, now that you've been through that trauma, we're here to help you. We want to wrap our arms around you. We want to help you process this. We want to help you get a new life. And that's the recovery services. And that's what we really got specialized in and taking care of. And then I think what happened is we started getting more women locally, just even coming to our office, like on fentanyl in our parking lot, drugs, crying out, wanting out of the life. And we're going, man, we're really set up to take women from other communities into our program. But again, reach out to our network. We're part of 3 awesome national networks, and that's how we get a lot of the women into our program. We started calling them, and we're like, hey, we're noticing a couple things. One, we don't live out in the middle of nowhere. We're in an area that there is trafficking happening, so we're getting locals reaching out to us. 2, we're getting people that are coming to our program that aren't ready to go to our program. Like, we're being told from some of these other organizations, hey, we found somebody, she's ready to go into your program. She's not ready. She's still like detoxing. So they'd show up to our program. They weren't ready to go into a long-term care program. And so we started asking around, and that was what the network was seeing too. And I said, hey, what would it look like if I shut everything down that wasn't trafficking related and we just focused on anti-trafficking and being the best anti-trafficking organization in the Northwest? And the first thing we did was we started doing the prevention. They're like, let's do it. So we started doing the classes, and then the next thing was, well, now we need to figure out how to help with the intervention piece. And that intervention piece is, they might walk into a detox center, they might get rescued by a police officer, they might get rescued by a group of motorcycle club members. Like, I don't care how we get them, but once they come to us, how do we help them, right? They need that emergency stabilization care before they can go into these long-term care programs. And that didn't exist out here. There was just like nowhere to send them. So if somebody's actually coming off drugs and fentanyl and meth and all that, and they'd just been trafficked, there wasn't anything that was really specialized care.
How would a hospital handle that? If
they would help them go through detox, and now we're connected with the hospitals, and my staff is actually training some of them. And so,
but then after that,
that's it. I mean, that's that they need a place to go, right? And so
they end up back in the system somehow, right?
Yeah.
If they don't have a real,
or they'll end up at like a homeless shelter or something, and they'll just right back in the street, because they're not anything against them, but they're not trained to just work specifically with women coming out.
And these abusers, that's like their property. Like that's a scary thing. People don't realize all the problems associated with this. It's it's not like even if they went to the hospital and they get out on the street, it's not like they just re-enter society, correct? They have the fear of their past abuser, who probably is looking for his gold. You know what I mean? I don't know if there's a big connection with that.
It's real. That's a real reason why most of the women we help, if they're local, we try and get them out of town. It's just
in
hard
a safe place.
Yeah, it's hard to go through recovery if you're worried about running your trafficker.
Are they all worried?
For the most part, some of them are. Some of them might not be if they've been out of the life for a while, but there's always that thought of like, am I going to run into a John or somebody that's bought me? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just easier to have them in a different, get out of that situation and just be in a safe location where they can just work on their recovery. No question, So that's kind of been our biggest look at as an organization, and going, okay, well, then the next thing after the education is we're going to need to be able to provide that emergency stabilization care. And we were getting a lot of calls for outpatient care. So we'd have a lot of women that might have kids or a job that have been trafficked, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, but they're still going through a lot of that trauma, and they want to be a part of a community. Sure. And so we were sitting there going, all right, well, let's pray for a facility that's, on a bus line in the city, can one day be used for 24/7 drop off, could provide outpatient care, could be a headquarters.
Sure.
And so that's kind of where we land on purchasing our local strip club.
Yeah, last week I was at 7 a.m. I showed up to an old strip club in Spokane Valley that I was invited to, and it was a really cool thing. I got to hear this guy right here, Caleb, sort of give this powerful sort of testimony to a vision he had and to sort of a dream coming to life. But it was really this, where did the idea come to convert a strip club into your headquarters for your mission and for your cause and your charity.
Yeah, that was just God, man. Like, I'm a pretty visionary type person, but I couldn't even thought of that. What happened was, for the last 6 months, me and our directors were working on our strategic plan. And through that strategic plan of going, okay, if we close everything down and we just want to be the best trafficking agency, anti-trafficking organization, what do we need? And we had different facilities and safe houses and stuff like that, but we were like, we really need a headquarters that would be local in the city.
But a strip club.
Yeah. So then right after we get done with that strategic plan, this guy just shoots me over that the Deja Vu strip club had just shut down and it was for sale. And I'm immediately looking at it going,
if someone would have bought it, not you, could they have reopened it as a strip club?
Yeah. So what I was told from my city council members was that it was grandfathered in. And so there was a whole year where somebody could have reopened that thing.
And that would have been probably, quote unquote, highest and best use for that property from a normal sort of investor's perspective.
Yeah.
It's been running since the 1970s, right? That strip club. I mean, and then that building's been there since the 30s, I think you said?
Yeah, I think in the 70s in the 30s and 40s it was a movie theater for families.
Okay.
In the 70s it became a porn theater.
That's right.
And then in 89 it became a strip club.
I'll tell you what, man, when I was walking in there, you could almost sort of feel the trauma and the hell and the abuse. It's such a seedy environment already, and it was such a rundown building. You can just feel the grossness and sort of the moral decay that was in the air, and that's why I think it's such a powerful story.
That's after we cleaned it all up, too.
I can't even imagine.
And had like multiple worship services in there.
You guys got to see sort of what I saw for our listeners out there. What a really powerful experience that was. And for our viewers, maybe we could show some of this, but just to be able to kind of walk in there and imagine. Now there's some visionary that's going to transform this. Yeah. You know, it might even be a model across America, a franchise model, to close down strip clubs and turn them into facilities to fight sex trafficking somehow, some way.
Dude, it was crazy.
I love this shit.
So that night, I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, there's no way. Like, what am I going to do with this, right? And I couldn't sleep. And I'm sitting there going, man, God, you are crazy enough that maybe you would do that. Maybe you would take a building that was known for like exploiting women and turn it into a place of healing for exploited women. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there going, that's crazy. So I hit the guy up in the morning and I'm like, hey, I just want to get in the building. I just want to look at it. It was
first action step. Let me get in there.
Immediately.
Sir.
I'm like, let's go look at this. Cool. So it's under contract.
It was already?
Yep.
Someone already put it under contract?
Yeah, So it was already under contract.
Who owned the building?
I got the guy's name.
It wasn't the strip club. Well, I don't need his name, but it wasn't the people that own the strip club. They were leasing it from the landlord.
No, it's the strip club owns a franchise.
Okay, so they own the building.
Yeah.
Did you have to pretend? Did they want to keep it going as a strip club? Was there any?
No, I think
was there a game you had to
what
play?
I had heard that it was that particular club. It kind of when COVID hit. It kind of got out there that the club had shut down, even though it hadn't. And so what I had heard is they were kind of just wanting to get rid of it.
Just be done with it. No, they didn't care one way or another?
Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't have to go in covertly and pretend you're another strip club guy. You know what I mean? Okay, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, so I mean, there was
they didn't know it was going to be you, though. That was going to really make a big mark and the whole media was going to get a hold of it. And the news was going to get a hold of it. This turned into a big story here.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah, so we had
a national story.
Yeah, we actually So we put an offer on the facility, kind of did like an as and or assigned type of situation, if you understand what that is.
Sure, but as it was already in contract.
Yeah, so we got it. Yeah, so it was under contract. I go in and I look at it, and that was interesting because the day that I was supposed to go there, I just happened to have a survivor and our anti-trafficking director with me. Okay. So I was like, hey, let's go look at this facility because I'm not going to do anything without their permission. Not so that, but like, because they're the ones that are being served. So I'm like thinking, would a survivor freak out if we bought a strip club? How would that impact their life?
Interesting.
Would this even work well? Like, is it the right layout? So we end up going there. Dude, we walk in there. You think it was heavy. That it was intense. There's naked women all over the place, like posters and stuff. Like, it was pretty intense. And so we walk in there. We walk in there. But dude, the layout of like everything that we needed, and it was on a bus line on Sprague. Everybody that we work with knows where the location of that club is. It's a concrete box, and there's no windows. Like everything that you could possibly want. So I'm sitting there going,
this is it.
This is it. So I tell the guy, I'm like, hey, if it falls through, let me know. And 2 weeks later, he hit me
fell
up.
through.
Yeah.
Well, it was meant to be. That was a divine thing. But I'll just speak to the power from my perspective, sort of as a consumer on this side of it. I'm not in it the way you are, but what drew me into the story is the symbolism behind it. Because we all think of strip clubs as like Vegas, bachelor night, a lot of fun, hurrah, rah, rah, like we're partying with, hot chicks everywhere. Yeah. But what you don't see is the lifestyle of these women that are just exploited, and that's what they know, and that's what they do, and they use their bodies to make money. And it's a slippery slope when you start there. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of listeners like, I like strip clubs, but like you're not really considering the amount of abuse that is hand in hand with the lifestyle of this world. Yeah. And what a great symbol, as a symbol of a beacon of hope and a beacon of light, to be able to transform from dark to light. I just think it's really powerful.
And we had a lot of people that were mad and wanted us to tear the building down.
They want it gone.
Yeah, because there had been so much stuff that had happened in there for 30, 40 years.
Well, now I'm sure you've got community support. Now they've seen the vision. They see how serious you are.
Yeah. But I just told them, I said, hey, listen, man, it doesn't matter how dark it is. Like, I feel like God wants us to renovate and clean this up and use this for something better.
That's amazing.
I was like, I deserve to get torn and thrown away too.
Yeah,
but he didn't do that to me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, we're gonna switch this up and use it for something else.
Genius.
And so the first thing I did when we got the building is I just called all the guys in the community together, and we had 300 dudes show up, and they just repented and dedicated the building to God. And we had a worship night. Yeah, so we just at first, because it was a gentleman's club, I thought it was only right that the men don't like actually say, hey, we want to dedicate the building to the Lord. And so that was an incredible evening.
Wow, that made the front news paper, headlines everywhere. I remember that.
Yeah, that was it. And then the women were like, hey, we want to do something too. So then like a month and a half later, we had the women's night, and that was nuts, bro. Like, we had a woman that actually was one of the managers there at one point that like did the color scheme, picked out the carpet. She was in there worshiping God. Like it was nuts. I walked in, there's like 300 plus women just worshiping God on the carpet, crying. And it was like that with the men's night too, because like half the dudes that showed up had been in that club buying women.
Totally. I could see blood on some of that carpet. Yeah. Almost, there was one wall that looked like blood was splattered on the wall. You can't even imagine the amount of horrors and hell that would. And if that was your daughter, imagine if you had a daughter and she ends up in a seedy place like that, having to work to survive. Like, these are your worst nightmares. If you're a good person, nobody should end up in a place like that. But you felt that in the building. But for you guys to transform this in a place that is going to help revive people, what a great mission and a cool purpose. And again, I'm going to put that seed in your head. What a cool franchise model. To take buildings, I mean, it's the symbolism behind it that may have more strength to your cause and momentum by taking something that's evil, if you will, and repurposing it into something that has now this beautiful light with God attached to it. What a cool way to transform things all across America. I mean, if we can inspire other people in different communities to go out and do this, I just think there's more validity than you may even realize about the long-term effects of you inspiring other people to see something that you might normally pass right past. Say, no way I can make, like, that's a strip club, or whatever, and say, well, wait a minute, like, why not bring light to where there's darkness? And I just love the concept. I just think it's genius. That's why
it was neat, man. I think what was cool is just like as a community, like in Spokane, that's where Father's Day was founded, right? So
what? Father's Day was founded in Spokane. What does that mean? I didn't know.
Yeah, Father's Day was founded in Spokane.
As a holiday?
Yeah.
Oh.
It was founded in Spokane. And so for us, it was like, hey, listen, and then we have this gentleman's club, right? So for us, it was like, what would it look like if the men in our community said, hey, instead of continuing to keep this gentleman's club where we're objectifying women, what if we instead came together and purchased the building and turned it into a facility to help heal our women and kids?
Beautiful.
And that was, I think, was just like the coolest thing to be a part of. Bro, so after I did that interview or the tour with you, I found out what really happened in that back room.
What?
Like the downstairs back weird room that you said you went in and you were like, bro, this feels super weird.
Yes.
So a DJ that had been working there for a long time, he came in and met with me later that afternoon.
For real?
Yeah, he was like crying. And he's like, dude, I'm so happy you're getting this. I saw some all crazy stuff going through here. Oh. And so he gave me a tour from his viewpoint, and I didn't realize it, but the main room was just like the main strip area, right? And then we went into that VIP room. He said in the back, he said what they'll say is that it used to be a place where they would sell like adult toys and stuff like that. But he said what happened was when he was working there, it was the exclusive VIP room.
Oh.
So he said there was like
That's
little different
happened.
booths there. He said multiple times he had walked in and there was like full service sex work going on back there.
Of course, that's a whorehouse.
Yeah, so that's what was interesting. And then I think what was also interesting learning through this is that I had one of the managers reach out to me, and she was actually excited we were getting the building. And she had trained herself on sex trafficking. So she would actually, when the women would come in, she'd actually interview them. We found like actual booklets and trainings on human trafficking in the club when we got it. So she was actually would interview the girls and make sure, like, are you actually choosing this or are you being forced into this, right? Because the difference between sex work and sex trafficking is force, fraud, or coercion.
Okay.
So if somebody's choosing that life, that's not sex trafficking.
And does that bother you
somebody's being
if they do
forced.
choose a life? Just curious.
For me personally, as a Christian, I would wish that they would choose something else, right? But at the same time, I'm like, I'm still going to love on them, and we're still going to try and do life with them.
You're not judging them.
No, we want to love on them and be with them and try and connect with them.
Yeah.
And as a Christian, I'm like, man, I wish there was like, I think it's sad that what we do as men is we tell women, oh, you want to make real money? Take your clothes off. Literally. Oh, you want to make real money? You got to do OnlyFans. Like,
oh yeah, that's
like real talk though. Like that's what we tell these young girls, and is like, you want to make real money, you got to take your clothes off. And I think that's what's sad. So like some of those girls, man, that were at the club, some of them were frustrated and sad that they lost the club. And we met with them and had them come in, and they were like crying. They were like in the back room tearing up. And the reason is because they've been told since they were a little kid, that's all they're good for is sex work. And they don't mean anything else. The most important thing about them is what they can give a man sexually and their body. Yeah. Right. And so now they're like, at least when we were at the club, we got to choose who could touch us. We got to choose what would happen to us. We had bouncers that looked out for us. Now that we don't have it, we're going to be out on the street and it's going to be way worse. Yeah. And that was like, to them, they were like crying because they lost their, and they just lost in their mind, there's a safe place for them to do this.
Yeah, that's a perception of their value.
Yeah,
that's been indoctrinated in them. Yeah, these girls that choose it, a lot of them had a hard life.
Yeah,
and this is the most accessible point they have to cash flow.
They got kids. They want to take care of their kids.
There's
all of it. There's like they'll do whatever they can to take care of their kids. You know, and that's the thing that breaks my heart. Is it's like. I think personally, sex trafficking starts in the junior high hallway. As soon as you hit junior high, the world's trying to get you addicted to porn. Totally. As a young guy. Industry. Like immediately, your value is based on your body count.
Yeah. And now,
as a dude,
with social media, they really glamorize things like OnlyFans. Yep. And you see the big followings and the lavish lifestyle of these people that flaunt their wealth is what is perceived wealth, whether it is or not, I don't know. Yeah. But they make it look like it's this dream life. I'm really convinced that behind the scenes of these beautiful women who have these massive followings, who are teaching young girls that, I want to be that one day. But beneath the surface, a few clicks here or there, and you just see the truth about what's going on. But that's sort of this fantasy that I can have this quote unquote freedom, live free, have all the money in the world, do what I want. Yeah. And now 13-year-olds are saying, well, I wonder if I sold my picture of my foot and I did a little OnlyFans, like, I get $50, $20. Well, let me see your inner thigh. Okay, well, this picture, now it's this uniquely slippery slope. But the whole point is, I think, foundationally, what put me in the light was somehow feeling like society is crumbling, and that good men can no longer do nothing. And even if I impact just a little bit, it's worth it. Yeah. But I had to get over sort of to my story a little bit, and maybe yours too. Now, as you come out into the light and really fully expose yourself, we have to really confront our own insecurities. And you have to know why you're doing it, because it's uncomfortable, to build a brand, Caleb, that's going to drive a lot of attention to your mission. You're going to have to get out there. It's uncomfortable. You're such a humble guy, and it's just so uncomfortable. But this is why good men should stand up and get out there and make noise and really go after this shit, because it's going right to your children. Whether you realize it or not, they're being impacted by it. And this is, who knows what the future looks like, but I'll just tell you this. If you keep sitting on the sidelines and not participating, like guys like Caleb, this is like, I admire people like this. They're actually the ones that are doing something. And I just think it's really cool. But even if you participate a little bit, even if you do a podcast, you bring awareness, you give donation, you just give some sort of of yourself to these causes, that is really important, because I don't know where this ends. We talked about this in the coffee shop, this idea of what's wrong with society, where's this headed? When you look back at history, has this happened before? Does history repeat itself? Does society kind of operate in cycles? And maybe I'll pose a question here out of that. So Joe Rogan really popularized this concept that when strong men are in charge, they're creating this healthy, happy, comfortable society. And a comfortable society creates really soft men. Yeah. And these soft men are what create these really hard, tragic times. It feels like we're headed down that pathway because when me and you were kids, and it happens fast.
We don't even know how to be men anymore, bro. And being masculine's toxic. Yeah. Like that's what we're taught. That's what we're trained to do. So it's like we're not even really taught on how to be a man.
Well, how does this end then?
Well, I'm just saying, in the cycle that we're in. When you look at sex trafficking, bro, that's the end of the conveyor belt. Like we're looking at the end of the conveyor belt is like the real issue, right? And that's what I was trying to say. Like sex trafficking, it starts in the junior high hallways. So as soon, like I talked about from the guy's perspective, they're trying to get guys addicted to porn at such a young age. It's like you're basically trained to start looking at women as objects instead of humans from a young age. Then it doesn't take much for you to be like, well, let's just go to the club. Let's just buy an escort. Like, let's, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't just happen overnight. Yeah. And for these women, these young girls, man, they get in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. It's like society's screaming at you. The most important thing about you is your body. The most important thing about you is what you can give a man sexually. So now you have women that are starting to look at themselves as objects or going, well, at least if I'm only going to get looked at as an object, at least I'm going to control who's doing the objectifying to me, right? So that's what, like we have a lot of women that are like, well, at least on OnlyFans, I don't have somebody touching me, right? But if I'm going to make money, if I'm going to do this, this is what I've been trained to do my whole life. This is what I've been told is is what I'm valued for, right? And I think that's what's crazy to me. And as a Christian, I started really looking into this and going, what happened, man? So I started reading the Bible, because that's where you should start. And it's interesting. There's this book called the Book of Kings. And it's talks about like the history of all these great kings. And it said this king did what was right in the eyes of the Lord because he tore down the high places. And then it said then this king didn't do what was right because he didn't tear down the high places. And he didn't tear down the high places. And he didn't tear down the high places. And then this king did what was right and he tore down the high places. Okay. So they were basically like told they either did right or not on whether they tore down the high places. And the high places where people would go and they would worship sex and blood. Sure. Right? And they do child sacrifices and they would worship sex. Yes. And that's where the high places, right? So I find it interesting that in America, when I started looking at like when did all this stuff kind of start taking off? When did all this like incarceration, divorce, like when did all this stuff happen? It's really interesting that in the 60s, we took prayer and Bible out of school. So the thing that was a foundation, like my parents, they grew up like knowing right from wrong. There was a moral law in society. Our generation, bro, there was no moral law. Did you ever learn the Bible in school? Did you even pray at school? I didn't at the public school. So it's like we're all creating our own moral law. We're all trying to figure out.
We are God.
Yeah,
in many
like
respects.
Humanism, like I am God. So, you know, and truth is relative. And so that wasn't the case back then. But when you take the Bible and prayer out of school, then next thing you know, you got pornography's legalized, abortion's legalized. And so it's really interesting. It's like the high places, bro, when you have prayer and Bible as your altar and where your community's worshiping, that's you have a healthy country. And then you tear those down and then they put up where we worship sex and blood. Yeah. So now as a country, how many kids have been aborted? How many kids have died? And then on the flip side of that, how many of us are addicted to pornography? How many? We just worship sex. That's what we do. That's what we worship now.
It's funny. It's interesting. You're right. So you have the lowest testosterone like rates ever. Like that's an epidemic in men. So this almost demasculating. We're confusing young boys and girls on what sex and gender even is, and it's that odd confusion. It's funny, I was talking to Matt about this, and he goes, I have 4 young boys. If I was even going to introduce into their young little developing mindsets and all their neural pathways that are growing and developing that you can be a girl if you want, that would just bother his child. He goes, I know my son so well. He goes, even introducing that thought would just... it would chew at him. It would really eat him up. He would be bothered by it. It would be a stressor for his little mindset. We're doing this to children now all across America. It's standardized, and they're keeping it from the parents. They're really pulling parents out of the equation and God out of the equation. It's not just God they're pulling out of the equation. They're pulling the parents out, and the state knows best. The state.
Yeah.
This sounds like communism to me. I mean, if you think about what you mentioned, you kind of look back in history and
you
you're
sound
saying,
like a hardcore liberal, bro.
yeah, I must be. But when God got pulled out of the equation of sort of what was taught as a standard in schools, and looking at even in the 1950s, there's actually there's a book called Rules for Radicals. It's a famous book written by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton's mentor. His name was Saul Alinsky. He was a professor, I think, at Harvard. He wrote this book or something like that. But he wrote this book called Rules for Radicals. It was basically how to take down capitalism. And it was Marxist idealism. And in that, they talked about you've got to strip God out of society, out of schools. That was one of sort of the hearts points of the book. The other thing is we need to take over education, pop culture. Hollywood was a point even back then. And media, all media.
That's interesting.
And so if you can control sort of how information flows and you can take God out, you create a perfect recipe to destroy freedom. Or they called capitalism, capitalism was the enemy of these Marxists, but it's really freedom from my perspective. Sure. And what a cool way to cripple society and make you weaker. And to America's enemies, this is genius. Do you think they got a lot of these problems going on over in China right now that we have? This idea that we're going to confuse our young men and women. Do you think their social medias are littered with all sorts of intoxicating, like porn, pull in for little boys? No. Like the algorithm is so different over there. It's just interesting when you look at when you look at how it all works.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like we're just like in a bad dream, man.
Yeah.
Like if you're just sitting there watching something, and you're like, it feels like you're about to get in a car wreck, and then you're like, is anybody going to pump the brakes on this?
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking at the older generation leaders in front of me going like, is somebody going to tap the brakes? And then it hits you and you're like, I don't think anyone's tapping the brakes, man. I think we're going to have to tap the brakes. And I think our generation's going, dude, how many of us like actually have I'm very in a rare situation where I have a healthy mom and dad that still live together and are married. That is, all my friends don't have that set up, right? It's like we live in a country where it's just, this is normal. Like divorce is rampant. This is like
keeping your word, commitments, integrity,
we're tired
character.
of it. Like when are we going to get tired of it and stop drinking the freaking Kool-Aid and go, listen, this isn't working out. We're not becoming a better society. We're not more like, like when are we going to stop drinking the Kool-Aid?
I coach a lot of people and I notice with them this habit, this sort of trending habit. A lot of these people that are like trying to work on themselves in personal development, they shut off the news, which in many respects is probably a good decision. There's a lot of manipulation in it, and it really leads to a stressed out life. Yeah. So there's value in it for sure. But what happens on the flip side is they're not in the know. They're so detached from the know. And I've always thought, is there a way to sort of blissfully be informed as you really put energy into controlling what you can control, the controllables inside your own economy, so that you can be well-informed, well-educated, in the know, in all the right places, but you don't let it destroy your personal life? Because then what's the point if you're stressed out your whole life? Yeah. And that's the question I want to ask for you is, how do you confront all this evil on a regular basis and maintain joy and happiness? Because it's such a toxic, sad world when you're always in the damn trenches. Yeah. And that's, ignorance is bliss. Yeah. And so if I ignorantly ignore it and I just worry about making my own little money, it's kind of a cool place to ride for the rest of your life. Yeah. But then you're not really doing anything that's fighting back. So how do you create a balance of fighting back? I mean, how would you coach on this? How would you inspire someone to live a full life, a fulfilled life, give back, go after all your dreams, make all the money you want, all that, use your resources for good, but don't let it affect you in a way where you're miserable, you have bad energy, you're stressed out, you have anxiety, your blood pressure's high, all the things, because this is the kind of the dichotomy I think that is it real. You want us to care, and we're going to help each other here. Yeah. You want us to care, but now that I'm in this world, I'm stressed out, and it's scary, and it's sad, and now I'm miserable, and I don't want to be miserable. Yeah. How do you blend this whole thing together where it serves you as a human and your family, it helps society, you're not ignorant, but you're not letting it destroy you, but you're still thriving in your own economy? Isn't that the dream somehow, to put it all together, with God being the center point?
That's it.
There it is, yeah.
You take him out of it, you're done. You can't do it. Because the thing is, bro, is like, I don't know about you, but I'm like an all-in guy.
Me too, bro.
Like there's like,
I feel that.
I don't sleep. I'm up all night trying to figure out how to handle this stuff. Like it's just like, let's go. And so I think with that, there comes this grace that God gives you to work in this industry, because there is a lot of darkness. There is a lot of pain and agony, and you see the worst of society, but then you see the best of society.
There you go.
Does that make sense? So I'm meeting with guys
going.
like you that are like, hey, I want to actually use my influence to actually help people in need. And so you meet with people and you see the donors, you see the people that want to help, and then you see people's lives get transformed. And you see women that can't sleep all of a sudden have a full night sleep. You see people that are addicted to drugs, and now next thing they have a job and they have a car and they have a career and they have children. You see all the best of, you see what God can do and transform a life. So it keeps you going, because you're like, I really just want to introduce people to God, because I'm like, listen, this is where we're missing it. Sometimes it's crazy to me, because this is how I went through my whole entire life. It's almost like I thought I was just a body and a soul. I didn't even really connect that out of spirit. So like, if I cut your arm off, are you still Erik?
Of course.
Okay, so you're not just a body, right?
Not at all.
Okay, so but we don't think of it like that. Like, you're just because you're missing an arm, you're still the same guy. You still have the same personality. That's your soul. That's what God gave you to like who you are, and that soul is gonna like either go be with God at the end of your life or it's not, right? And then your spirit is the part that connects you to God. And most of us go through our whole entire life not connected to God at all. And so what was the coolest thing about Jesus isn't that he just came and died, bro. It's that he came and he died, and he went to heaven and sent the Holy Spirit. He says, better that I die and go to heaven so I can send the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit's the one down here on the earth. When you accept Christ as your Savior, you get filled with the Holy Spirit. And now all of a sudden you're able to communicate with God. That's why he died. He wanted us to be able to communicate with God and have a relationship with God. And so when you have that and you're connected to the Holy Spirit, it's like a cheat code in life, because all I have to do every day is just go spend time with God. You want to know what I do? I have literally, my office is like a church setup. I read my Bible. I have a worship set. I go in and spend time with the Lord every single day. And then I ask him what he wants me to do. And then I'm just crazy enough to go do what he asks me to do. It's that simple. And that's how I've been able to like get to pull just the crazy adventures that I've been able to do in life, is just from tapping into that and seeing God at the end of my life. I know that we only are down here one time, right? So how much more years? I got 60 years. The last thing I want to do, bro, is be up in heaven, looking back down on earth and going, I just missed it.
Didn't do shit.
I didn't do anything. I got a cool boat. I got a cool house. But it's like, I didn't like, the only thing I can bring with me to heaven is souls.
Agreed.
It's my friends with me to find Christ and go to heaven with me. So that's the most important thing. And I think that's what drives me more than anything, is I'm like, I've had freedom. I've been set free. I'm not addicted to drugs anymore. I'm like, you can look in my eyes and see hope. Like, that wasn't who I was. And so when you experience that, you can't help but like go share it with other people. And when you see women that are coming out of the life that are like been raped 10 times a day and they're just like dead inside, and then all of a sudden they find Christ and they find hope, and their whole life is completely transformed, bro, it fuels you. You're like, this is what it's about. And I think that's why it's crazy. We just strip that out of everybody's life and out of society, because it's the thing that like set all of us apart. It's what made America great, and we've just completely ripped it out.
I actually agree with you. I want to say two things that I think are valuable to throw out there. One is a little story that you told me, and then I'll jump to two. It's just a triggered thought that I think is good for people to hear, because not everyone may be Christians, which is totally fine. I have no beef with anyone's religion. But I'll draw a bigger point there. But the first thing is this idea of Jesus Christ. So I heard something on one of the videos that you put out that was from one of your community members who's been through your program, and their lives have been changed. It was a woman who was trafficked, and she was on drugs, and she was talking about her journey with just being sobriety. And she said, folks on sobriety never worked for me. I tried it over and over again. She goes, the only thing that ever worked on me was Jesus Christ. And I just really thought that was a really profound connection between a person on their journey to real freedom, even if they've been through in hell most of their life. Focusing on the thing that is supposed to fix you is not near as powerful as just focus on God, really. And I just thought that was her experience, her reality. That was how she experienced her change from a person that had no control to a person that's in complete control. And again, that wasn't you telling her to say that. It was her experience of this didn't work, this time didn't work, this time didn't work. But the one time I didn't make it about sobriety, I made it about following in Jesus and believing in him. That is when everything changed. I saw that really powerful connection there. And for people that aren't necessarily Christian, I just want to make sure I just say this. This isn't a politically correct statement, but it's a real value in it. In that fundamentally, at the end of the day, if you just care about freedom, let's bring it down to something simpler for even people that maybe not are unsure about God. Mm-hmm. Pulling God, if you really just go back and you look at the trajectory of where things started and what society was like, what people were like, what evil looked like at its time during its day and all the different evolutions of it, kind of just trying to identify like where it sort of shifted. And this will be debatable in some respects, but it's just really interesting. There's not one benefit to taking God out of a classroom, even if you don't believe in him. And I've always thought that. Like, say I didn't believe in God. Taking him out of the classroom is not helping my little girl. I promise you. There's no downside in really looking at a creator in the Bible and the Ten Commandments and understanding what sins are. The whole concept, the stories of the Bible are just littered with just really interesting lessons, life lessons that are really valuable. But when you take it out and you replace it, somehow you're replacing it, whether you realize it or not, with the state. The state knows best for your child. Yeah. That's not been good for society. It's not been good for your child. It's not been good for humanity. So even if you're not fully sold.
And the state is just a bunch of people.
100%.
It's just a bunch of other people.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think that sometimes we forget. We think, oh, it's the state. And then I'm like, no, they're human beings that are telling you what's best for your life.
You ever read the book Animal Farm? Oh, such a good book. Written by George Orwell. He also wrote the book 1984. It was written, I think, in 1984. Animal Farm. It was in the 80s. But it talked about this farm when there's all these farm animals. And these pigs, they were the clever ones. They were the smart ones. Then you had the workhorse. That was the guy that could work from, hardworking. He'd wake up when the sun was, before the sun came up, and he'd work all the way to the bitter end. Then you had the lazy animals. You kind of went down the line. And it really showed just through how a farm can work, really how... the connection was to communism back in the 80s in the rush to for nuclear arms race. So that was a big topic at its time, but there's so much knowledge built into that story of how these pigs controlled everyone. And I've always thought when it comes to sort of this deep state, the state, politics, it's these fat little pigs that are at the top that run everything. And they manipulate, everything's manipulated, everything's controlled, it's big money, it's powerful entities and these face creatures. And it's just sort of, these are the pigs at the very top, but it's how I view this. So when I think of the state, I've always thought, well, these are the pigs that have figured out. It really takes a lot of these workhorses, some of these like people with big hearts who give a lot of themselves, who are really getting abused and beat up from these pigs. It really to collectively come together and realize we have a lot more strength than those fat little pigs. And that always sat me, even as a kid when I read the book. I thought, well, the horses are so
You voted in the fat little pigs.
Yeah, how did this fucking happen? The horses could kill the shit. The bulls with the horns, we could kill the shit out of these pigs. Why are they controlling all this? Collectively, we have more power than we realize, but they keep us hating each other. The pigs are so smart at creating controversy. They create all this chatter, and what we do is we hate each other while they just laugh all the way to the bank, quite literally, because they're the ones sitting in the ranch house, in the farmhouse, eating all the good food, drinking all the water, living the good life.
Well, it's become, because I think a lot of times it's a business. So it's like, how do some of these people, you can see which ones are good politicians or not. You just follow the money.
It's true.
I mean, honestly. So it's like, how does somebody that comes in and is making $100,000
Why was
a year
Trump hated
ends
so
up
bad?
being millions and millions of dollars coming, get a year coming in. And it's interesting when you look at that, because you're going, well, I think what's happening is the government's just becoming like a business. So when you're sitting down there in your government or a company, you're looking at your profit and loss statement. So how do we get more money to build our business? And I think that's really what has happened, is the government's just turned into a big business. Yeah. And that's why I had to turn down $1 million opportunity from our city council, because I was voted in to come in and try and apply for this money. And I wanted the money. I wanted the $1 million so that I could go buy this building.
But what restriction did they put on you?
Yeah, they gave.
What was it?
There was only 3, and one of them seemed reasonable. Okay. Like, hey, if whatever we agree on, we got to keep the contract and use the money for what we agree on.
Sure,
so
that's
if
easy.
I ask you for
what's the one that broke you?
There was 2 of them. The second one was like, okay, I don't know how I feel about this. This one's rough, but it was, if we asked for any money for a building, they would put a 15-year restriction on our deed. So that was a bit rough for me, because I'm like, I don't really know if I want the government telling me what I can and can't do in my facility for 15 years. But I also understand that you don't want me to take a grant, buy a building, and then just flip it.
Sure.
So I'm like, let's talk through that. The third one, though, said, like, if I take any money, none of the money could be used for anything but secular use only. Yeah. And so I was like, I can't do that because you're telling me if I go buy a building, then I can't do anything religious in that building.
How
am I supposed to pray? How am I supposed to pray for somebody? How am I supposed to do any of this stuff? We don't force religion on the women that come into our program. I'm glad you didn't take the money, man.
That shows principle.
We don't. Forcing religion has never on people has never worked for anybody. It didn't work for me, so we don't force it on anybody. But if they're going to come into our organization, they know that's what's fueling us, and that's what our mission is. Is that we want to honor God, and that's why we're providing these services. Who are you to tell me that I can't pray with somebody? So that's why we have to be completely privately funded.
Yeah. On the face of a dollar bill, it says, "In God we trust." But yet, in today's society, anything government related, they've stripped out sort of the meaning of how America came to be. Yeah. The divine sort of nature, the divine nature behind how we came to be as a free country has been now replaced by these people that through the removal of that entity is making it much easier for them to retain in their power. I asked you, I kind of tried to slip this question earlier. I usually don't go too far into these subjects, but I think it's interesting, and I've thought a lot about this, and I just spent a good amount of time with Don Trump Jr., and I really had a really profound conversation with him, which is, Donald Trump's son. And
who's that?
What's that?
Who's that?
Yeah. Yeah, some guy's orange. But it was really profound sort of even talking with him, but this understanding of why he's hated so much. Like, really, why is he hated so much? And one of the things that I thought was actually kind of appealing. They weren't hated
until they decided to get into politics.
Yeah, every rapper in the world loved him. They were all wanted to be near him. He was in rap videos, the whole nine. You're right, exactly. And now he's this evil racist that does everything wrong. But I think my point, and one of the things that I looked between the lines, even if I knew nothing about politics, there's something I loved about Trump without knowing anything. And that was that the left hated him and the right hated him. They both hated him so much. And I was like, ooh, that's a guy that's a disruptor. I like disruptors. Disruptors are good for society. And he had a different incentive to go in there. All these other politicians, somehow they enter politics with no money. They come out of law school working, to serving some judge, and they work themselves all the way up and with no money. No money in that shit. And somehow they get into office and become millionaires. Interesting, right? How that all works. They get all this backdoor money from lobbyists and powerful entities to make sure you do what I want you to do. Politicians don't run shit. It's the money that backs them.
And you can look this up or fact check it, but when I was looking into like the cities that had the most trafficking, like Washington D.C. actually has the most trafficking per capita, like per the amount of people in that city. There's the most trafficking cases.
Yeah, I mean, what a symbol that is. You kind of taking the thought a certain direction. We were talking about this earlier, like how could a man harm a child? How can a grown man, like what is it? Is it a mental disorder? If you remember the conversation, we kind of went through a few different scenarios, the Epstein sort of scenario. We had all these Hollywood and powerful men, powerful politicians, and them being seen with these young girls. And, we know there's this list out there that of all the people that went to that island, of Epstein Island, but none of us, are ever going to hear the names for whatever reason. Sort of that protection from the political class over this subject. Here's another thought too. I've never, hardly ever heard any politician ever talk about sex trafficking. Like, it's just like oddly silent. Isn't that the most evil thing in the world? Don't you think they would be broadcasting that loud? I mean, we got this border where trafficking is almost incentivized to be happening right in front of our eyes. Americans are the largest consumer of it, and the supply is coming from somewhere. It's coming from everywhere. It's happening in-house, and it's being brought into this country. But how come it's so rare to hear people talk about it in politics? And you think it would be such a winning formula on the campaign trail. Yeah. But it's so elusively quiet, and it just makes you wonder. And so you have, getting back to the thought, you have these sort of perverted people that maybe have a psychological problem. But then you have people that are articulate, they're smart, they're in power. Why do they go after sort of what we described as, was it this idea of a forbidden fruit, and I'm so powerful that I should be able to touch it because I am God, and I can get away with it, and that's just a flex on their power. I mean, they're two different things, but it's still the same child that is being exploited and getting hurt. Mm-hmm. And so you have these layers of this stuff that are really interesting. Have you ever put real thought into that at all? Sort of the psychology of why so many girls get hurt? How come this is so fucking prevalent? It makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, I think for me, again, when I look back on it, I think a lot of it, when I look at it is just the simple fact that as a society we worship sex. And so as a young kid, you're just immediately...
But with children.
I don't understand the child part, bro. Don't. It's still
oddly taboo.
Wrecks my mind. Like when I interview somebody, like I interviewed a guy that had abused a kid, and I'm sitting there talking to him, and I'm hearing his story. He was abused his whole childhood.
Okay, interesting.
He's got his own abuse. So then all of a sudden, he's in a situation where he's able to be the one that is taking instead of being the one that's being taken from. And he's so curious to know what it feels like. He now abuses this
There
kid.
it is. You just said the third one.
And then I've interviewed guys that have trafficked women. And so I've met...
Do they just not care?
No, that's not totally true. It's all like a slow drip, dude. That's what I'm saying. It's like no one wakes up and goes, you know what? When I grow up, I want to be a prostituted woman. Or when I grow up, I want to sell women and be a trafficker. It never starts like that. It's like this one guy that I was talking to, this is just his story. He just grew up in LA and grew up in the gangs, and he ended up in prison. And then in prison, he learned how to pimp and he learned how to do that. And so he's a good looking dude and gets out, and now he's been trained on how to do that. And he would literally tell me, he's like, we would just look for women that were wanting hope and wanting a dream.
Sad.
And we would just figure out whatever that dream was. We would just sell that dream to them. And it had to be something to the point where they would be willing to give up their soul.
Let me help you, baby. I'll help you get there, baby.
Something that they wanted so bad, they'd be willing to give up their soul. And he had to make it look like he had that. And so as soon as he'd be like, oh, you want to be a model? I'm connected with all these modeling agencies. You want to be in the movies? I can get you in there. And that's what they would do.
Yeah, you have. Here's the angles that I'm hearing. You have the angle of sort of just pure mental disorder, if there is one, someone that just grossly, turned on by little kids. You have sort of...
which they're trying to normalize that now, too.
Minor attracted persons? What the fuck is that?
Minor attractive
me off, bro.
person, trainings and teachings. And then you're looking at the bottom of it, and it says by somebody like, that's a self-taught person. Like, I'll send you this thing that somebody sent me of a training that was going on over the West Side. And it literally is being taught by somebody that's like a self-taught minor attracted person. I've literally almost lost my mind. And it's just sad to me. Yeah. So they're trying to make that normal now.
Yeah. Anyone that can hurt a child has a lot of problems. But it's interesting. I think we've just disclosed something really interesting. It doesn't come from the same source. There's different motivations and different reasonings behind why it happens. But it's important, I think, just to identify what's there on the table. And you may have these powerful players in Washington, D.C. and in Hollywood. They've tasted every kind of fruit in the world. Well, I wonder what that fruit tastes like that I'm not supposed to have. I know that may sound sick and twisted how I just said that, but it's probably true to the reality of why someone crosses that line is because they get that God complex. There's really power in taking God out of the equation in your life and replacing it with this idea of you, which is being preached now big time. Yep. This whole idea that the universe is in me. Yeah. I am God. It's weird as fuck. To me, from my perspective, it's much more humbling to put something above you. Yeah. And but then you have sort of the twisted mental disorder, but you kind of went into the abuser now, the person abused oftentimes becomes the abuser, and I wonder sort of how much more prevalent that is than we realize. Someone was hurt as a child themselves, and somehow that becomes a thing that somehow turns them into the hurter. I don't know if you can speak to that. I think you said something that caught my ear.
I think I've met with multiple people. Sometimes they've been abused and they go so far the other way they would never abuse anybody.
Of course.
So I think people just land on it differently. But I think what's interesting is just like you said, everyone comes to the table everyone has a different story. It's never the same. Every traffic victim we've worked with, it's not the same. I mean, there's some similarities that we'll find as we've helped, because we've helped almost 200 women since we've started this. So you find similarities in stories, and there are some of them. Most of them are just like wanting to be loved and wanting to be cared for, and somebody taking advantage of that situation, and that's just crazy to me. But and then the other side of it is just darkness, man. It's a society that's just living in darkness. And when you pull Christ out of something, you pull God out of, you pull morality out of culture, then we're all trying to figure out our own moral law. And so if some guy decides, well, this is moral for me, who are you to tell me that I can't do this? Then And that's where we live. We just live in a place now where truth is relative. And that's the part that's scary to me. In my own life, I got in a lot of trouble trying to figure all that out. And at least when I opened up the Bible, I was like, I don't like this. I would love to be able to do this, and this. But the one of the meanings for the word sin is to miss the mark. So if you and I are playing darts and God's like, hey, the best is that bullseye, and anything outside that bullseye is missing the mark, it's not that he doesn't love us just because we missed the mark. All of us fall short of the glory of God. Dude, all of us are going to sin. We all need a savior, right? So it's not that we don't love people that are missing the mark, but the Bible shows us how to hit the mark and what God's best for us. And when I started really taking that serious, I was like, there was a lot of things in my life that I had to let go. Because to me, I thought, well, what's wrong with this? But then I'm realizing that's not God's best. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, I think when you just take away what is God's best, what bullseye are we shooting at? We all have a different mark that we're trying to hit. There isn't a clear understanding of this is right and this is wrong anymore.
Yeah.
Because you'd be like, well, what's your truth?
Yeah, it's all blurred
No,
lines.
what is the truth?
Yeah.
I want to know what the truth is, and then I need to adjust my life to the truth.
Sure.
And we all have struggles, and we all have our own things that we go through, and all of us have our own backstory and our own background. We're all going to tank it. We're all going to miss the mark. But I'm not going to sit here and say, that me coming up with my own mark is going to produce the same fruit as what God says is the best. Every time I tried to do my own thing, I just ended up in depression.
Yeah. One thing I'm always aware of when I do this show is not only just tell a story to inspire, but to try to always just deliver value. Always try to make any lesson in your story or my story or anything that is enlightening, it's educating, it's somehow giving value to our audience and making sure they can extract gold out of this. And I think we did drop a lot of value here, Caleb, but there's so many people out there that are struggling, and as you're talking and I'm just listening to all this, I'm thinking, well, for the longest time before I was really wide awake and aware, I thought everything we're talking about is so far away from us, nowhere close to us. But here's what's crazy. I was just thinking about as you were talking, how many people I know from all these categories that have been affected by abuse, sex abuse, that are very close to me. I have a dear friend who's going to write a book one day, and she'd never told her story in 30, 40 years. Yeah. Nobody knew except her sisters about what she's been through and how bad it really was. She told it to me, and we sort of somehow we inspired that out of her. And it's amazing to see the power of how she rose by telling her story. So one of the pieces of value I want to leave our audience is helping them transform if they've been abused in a way that will help really bring power and peace to their life, because I've watched other people do it. Yeah. If you don't think this is prevalent, I can tell you 10 stories on my hands from people that are in my coaching communities of abuse that they've been through. And these are people that are winning in life, doing so well. Prevalent now. Yeah, they're healed. Yeah. One woman in my coaching group has a son that she adopted, and he was abused as a kid. Now he's a teenager. They just found out he's an abuser. And they did everything in their power to give him a perfect life, to try to help him. He had a terrible story as a child himself. He was sex abused. And now he found out he's touching little girls, and he's a teenager now. And this woman's destroyed. Her life is destroyed over it. You have no idea how ruined. And I'm trying to coach her through this. Yeah. The point is it's all around us if you just start asking questions. If you can get... When I'm with people, one of the gifts of where I've landed me personally, and I'm sure this is with you, is I can get right to the child in someone. I'm sure that's the same with you. When you start operating this way, you start asking the right questions, and you get really truthful and really honest quickly and really vulnerable and heart-filled, and your brand kind of is that, you attract a lot of people that want to step in the light, and they feel called to be near you, and that's what I'm trying to pull out of people. But these stories are freaking everywhere. Bro, they're everywhere. Heard, statistics of 1 out of 3 women will be sexually abused by the time they're 18, and 1 out of 5 boys will be sexually abused by the time they're 18. That's 1 out of 3. That means if you have 3 daughters, likely one of them somehow going to get abused. Yeah. Isn't that nuts? Yeah. And there's also some CDC data that just came out, which I don't even trust the CDC. So meaning these numbers are probably worse because it's going to look bad on them as the people producing the report. But it's that 54% of teenage girls are persistently depressed. I think it was 36% of them have thought about suicide. This is where it got crazy. 1 in 4, 24% have actually planned their suicide, and 13% of all teenage girls have either tried or succeeded in suicide. There is this data around this, and you mentioned some of the trends, the social media, the collapsing of society, all the influence that's being jammed and bombarded in these kids' mind at an early age. What is something a parent can do to try to avoid the catastrophe of these statistics?
Bro, like one of the things is get Bark on your phone. So Bark's an app where you can track what your kids are doing and who they're talking to.
BARK.
Yeah,
That's
I think
cool.
that's one thing that we've noticed. But the biggest thing is you got to talk to your kids. So Society's screaming at your kids. It's okay for you to know who your kids are talking to on social media. And if
should you level with them? And meaning, you just tell me the truth.
Yeah,
and it's
but
not
you got to talk to them. But also, man, there's a lot of parents that are they're not giving their kids these smartphones anymore, and their kids are way better for it. Like sometimes I think if you just give a young kid like free access to whatever, they're gonna get themselves in trouble.
Yeah.
You know, and then you got to think like the marketing strategy, the porn industry, all this stuff. It's like trying to actually get kids addicted to these things at a young age.
Right.
So why would we just like play with fire? You know what I mean? And I think like it's an
hard
interesting topic because it's like we'll talk about it like with sex before marriage and stuff at church and stuff like that. And they'll talk about like, look, God created sex. God created like fire. Like fire's not bad. It's just fire in a fireplace is great. Fire in the middle of your living room's not that great.
It's dangerous.
So there's like there's rules and things around it because God wants what's best for us. And I think that and now we all go tank it in different ways, especially if you're not following God. But I think those are why those rules are there. It's because he knows us and he knows how we are and how we are created. And he just wants us to have the genuinely like safe best life, and we just choose to constantly not follow it. And I think with your kids it's just like you got to talk to them, because if you're not talking to them, culture's screaming at them.
Some guys on the other end of their gaming system, you know, putting thoughts in their head.
That's 100%, man. And I think we just have to, you know, at the end of the day, if you look at, so this is like what we're talking about is basically sexual slavery, right? That's what sex trafficking really is. When you look at slavery, it's like somebody that had to work for somebody against their will and make somebody else money. So you have these women that are sex slaves. They're literally having to be sold to make somebody else money. And then they're force-fed drugs. They're force-fed all this stuff that just keeps them either get on drugs so that they can function and do what they're required to do, or they're forced drugs so that they can be manipulated and controlled, you know? And I think ultimately, slavery's never ended without a sacrifice from a culture and from a community. This is never going to end without a sacrifice. And for us guys, bro, it's going to be a sacrifice of purity. It's not easy to be pure in this society. It's a sacrifice to not look at porn. It's a sacrifice not to just get on OnlyFans at your house. It's a sacrifice to like actually live pure with your and be just with your spouse. Like nowadays, it's so easy to get caught up in all that. It's going to take a sacrifice of purity for us to see like our culture changed. But ultimately, like we're just gonna we're gonna have to either man up and do the right thing, or we're just gonna keep just drinking the Kool-Aid, dude. You know. And I think ultimately, it's we're seeing the effects of it right now, and it's sad.
Caleb, I just want to, we're kind of wrap here. We're coming up against a hard stop. We went really long. This could have gone 2 more hours. But number one, I want to say what an amazing man you are. You're an inspiration to so many. And your greatest gift may actually be the amount of lives you inspire to go do work and try to compound your efforts that you're doing. How cool to spark the inspiration in 1,000 men to go touch 1,000 lives. Do you know what I mean? It's hard for you to touch it all. And it's really cool to sort of witness you step in the light, tell your story, and I'm going to encourage you to keep building that awareness, that brand, and then actually helping individuals, which is just powerful work. Where can we direct people if they want to help you? Right now, helpingcaptives.org. Everything's just going through Helping Captives. We're in the middle of trying to build that. ORG? helpingcaptives.org. That's what we're doing. Yeah. Helpingcaptives.org. Yeah. Yeah, we'll make sure. So if you want to help him, take this strip club out. They got to do all these costs to refurbish it. There's a lot that goes into this. And then get it up and running. Converting a strip club to a headquarters for your organization is not going to be cheap. So we want to make sure that we can drive as many eyeballs to your cause, many dollars to your cause, many people that want to help, they want to get involved. So helpingcaptives.org. We'll drop a link in the show notes where we're streaming.
Follow us on social media, Helping Captives. Everything's just Helping Captives, and that's where we're at right now. I'm putting everything into it. You know, I want to see everybody go take their mountain. I want to see people go and kill it. But my biggest thing is, like, when you go take your mountain, don't forget to help people that are in the valley.
Yeah, it's powerful. When you take your mountain, don't forget to help people in the valley. Yeah, it's part of the game. As you rise, you got to help more people. Yeah, and you'll find a lot of fulfillment in it. So, I appreciate it, man. You're doing God's work here on earth.
Thanks, brother. Cool. Just trying to be obedient.
Go follow Caleb Altmeyer. He's an amazing guy, and I'll make sure we link you here too. So, Caleb, thank you for what you do. If you guys like the show, I want you to please share this one. This is a really good one to share. There's a lot of value here, and this is the stuff these are the type of guys that keep the world going around. So please go help their cause. At least share the message. Make some noise about this, and become an ambassador that actually does something, fights for good. Instead of just complaining or yelling at the TV, there's so many ways to get involved and go help. I encourage you to go do that. And one way you can do it is just share the show. Share this to your friends, people you care about. Please like us, support us. We put a lot into this, and we're trying to bring value to the world, so we can't do that if you don't help us. So thank you for listening, guys, and we'll see you next week.
I'm a man on a mission. I'm a man on a mission.